When we say something was 100 years ago, I don't know about you, but I think of the Victorian era, not the Roaring Twenties. Personally, I still think of 2000 as being recent. But kids born in that year can now legally drink. Why is this? Why is time so weird?
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Well, there's two ways to perceive time. Egocentric, where it feels like you are moving through time, and time-centric, where it feels like it is moving through you. And they're not mutually exclusive. You can and will do both. Time seems to move faster as you approach a date and slower as you move away from it. For example, when you go on vacation and get stuck at the airport for 6 hours, it feels interminable. Conversely, when you are out playing on a tropical beach for 6 hours, that time seems to fly by. This is because when things get boring, you become more aware of time's passage than if you were distracted. Mundane things are something our pattern-loving brains love. We seek repetition and routine. And we like routines, but when we experience something new, it makes us sit up and take notice. Continuing with the vacation analogy, if I were to ask you what you did on your vacation a month after the fact, you'd probably be able to recall it with pretty good clarity. But if I ask you the details of your average life a month after it happens, you'll likely struggle to remember. When you are locked in a pattern, your brain pays less attention, and you are more likely to forget about that time. One of the major theories why we perceive time differently throughout our lives is that as we get older, there are fewer and fewer new experiences. As a kid, you're experiencing everything for the first time, which is why your childhood seems like it's stretched on forever. And as you get older, the decades seem to fly by. Of course, proportionately, the longer you live, the less a single year matters in the overall time scheme. When you're 5, a single year is a fifth of your entire life. But when you're 65, it's only a 65th, a much smaller piece of the pie. Part of the issue, too, is that we run into dissonance with our perceived mental image about things. When you think about Marilyn Monroe, you probably imagine a young, glamorous, beautiful woman. But if you think of Queen Elizabeth, you probably imagine an older woman. This is because you remember her as an older woman because you never experienced her when she wasn't. Well, interestingly, the Queen and Marilyn Monroe are actually the same age. Anne Frank and Martin Luther King were both born in the same year as well. And yet, we perceive them as existing in very different times, but they were contemporaries. We have a mental image of people at a certain age, looking a certain way, being a certain person, but your mental image is a lie. It's a snapshot. We can't help thinking of Betty White as an old woman because we've never experienced her otherwise. But obviously that wasn't the case. Because of this, we kind of forget that time is flowing for everything in the same way. Rise and fall, span after span. Harriet Tubman, for example, lived in both the time of Thomas Jefferson and Ronald Reagan. Now that sounds crazy and impossible, but it's true. She was born in 1822, when Jefferson was 79. She died when Reagan was 2 years old in 1913. But because we have such a fixed mental image of these two men, we have a hard time imagining them existing in other times. To us, Ronald Reagan will always be the president of the 80s, and Jefferson will always be one of the founding fathers from 1776. To illustrate this point, consider this. Cleopatra, the last Ptolemaic ruler of Egypt, consort of Julius Caesar, and one of the most famous pharaohs of all time, was born 2,090 years ago. When she was born in Giza, the pyramids outside her window were already 2,481 years old. They were ancient even in her time. And those same pyramids, when they were first constructed, mammoths still roamed the fields of North America. Humans tend to think about things in scale with ourselves, but we fail to reckon on how much things can change in the span of a single life. The government was paying out pensions to spouses of the Civil War veterans until 2003. My great-grandfather saw the invention of the light bulb, the automobile, the airplane, the bullet train, the computer, the internet, cell phones, space travel, gene sequencing, 2 world wars, the splitting of the atom, and a man walking on the moon in his lifetime. We went from the Wright brothers to Neil Armstrong on the moon in just 66 years. And then we went from the moon to Curiosity rover in 43. Technology doubles every 2 years or so, so the span of a human life can actually cover a lot of ground. Just in my lifetime, we went from rotary landline phones to cell phones to smartphones, from Betamax to Netflix and 4K. In fact, if you took a look at the total time of America from the Declaration of Independence all the way on up through today, and divided that number by the average human lifespan, you could cover that distance in just 3¼ generations. There might be people alive in the world today whose great-grandfather was alive when America first became a country. Time is like a river that never stops flowing. And if we want to keep our feet, we need to keep our eyes and mind open and always be creative. Thanks for watching.